Oh, I know what else I was supposed to do. Yeehaw! Oh, the camera's
Go Panthers.
You always make me laugh at the beginning of these meetings, Jess. Every single time you get me.
Do you keep a tally of the ones that you've said to make sure you make it around the horn?
I didn't. I haven't always done that. But in September, I did make a list of all the schools, and I just have them on a sheet now. And I just try to go down my list, and I apologize if I accidentally skip a school. That is not my intention. But yeah, I take it very seriously now. Mm.
We are waiting for other people to join us. I'm letting them in as they arrive. Good evening, all.
Hi, Pam. May I say something since we haven't officially brought the meeting to order yet? Everybody's on mute, so I'll just say something anyway.
Sure.
So Cassie, if you can hear me and others, I think you know my daughter is the director at the Gresham Historical Society. And she had a post a couple of days ago about that posted some pictures of some train pictures from the streetcar that ran along the Springwater Trail, and had some of the stops, you know, Linneman and Sycamore and Belrose and all that sort of thing. And the kid who was in the picture is a man by the name of Bob Jacobson. Does that name ring a bell with anybody? He was a music teacher at Meadows, and he left a lot of money to the school district for the music program, I believe in 2007. And we have a Robert Jacobson Jr. endowment fund as part of as part of our financials. And I'm interested in finding out some more about it, but I think that it's kind of the Centennial connection and the Gresham Historical Society connection. Anyway, I thought, Cassie, you might be kind of interested in that since you're involved with social media. I know a lot of you others are as well, but the pictures are really interesting because they're from the 40s. And Bob Jacobson at the time was probably about 10 or so. And
Wow.
then he became a music teacher somewhere along the line. It'd be interesting to know what his background is, because at some point he became a music teacher at Meadows.
That's cool.
It is. It is.
That's very
That would be a
cool.
really interesting project to kind of unravel on social media. And I bet there's people in the community who remember him,
Yes.
or, you know, like that would make those connections.
Yes. Well, in fact, one of the women on the board at the Historical Society taught at Lynchwood, at Powell Butte, then Lynchwood, and she was a music teacher there and remembers him. And I think there's also others who probably remember him, and I think others have been beneficiaries of his generosity to the school district.
Nice.
Thank you for sharing that, Director Andrews.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I'm getting so mixed up with my days right now. So my apologies and my apologies for being tardy. As you know that I will be running the meeting this evening, so I would like to call the meeting to order. Actually, let me pull up my agenda real quick. There we go. So yeah, I would like to call the meeting to order at 6:35. The approval of the January 26th agenda minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second,
Perfect. So we have a motion to approve by Director Shields. I believe that's who it was. And seconded by Director Andrews. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Yay. Awesome.
As the board secretary, was that unanimous? Did we have 6?
Yes, we did. Oh, yes, yeah, because Heath's not here. Yeah, that's right. So yes, that is unanimous. Thank you, Pam. So yes, that is unanimous. And with that being said, we are going to move on. Do we have any introductions of guests?
No, not tonight,
Not
Vice
yet.
Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. With that being said, we're going to go to approval of minutes. Has everybody been able to look at their minutes? Awesome. Do we have a motion on the floor?
Move to approve.
Second,
All right, so we have a motion to approve the minutes by Director Shields, seconded by Director Sol. I'm gonna say this wrong. Say it wrong.
Salowski.
Salowski. God, thank you. All in favor, please. Oh, yeah. Yeah, all in favor, please say aye.
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 That is unanimous. And with that being said, we will move on to reports. Yes, that's right. Because, oh wait, no, we have public forum. Is there any, I don't think there's any comments.
No, Vice Chair, there were no comments for this meeting tonight.
Thank you so much. So yes, then we're going to reports and then we have the superintendent's report. So Superintendent Owens, please take it away.
Great. Thanks so much. Good to see everybody this evening. And the superintendent's report was being finished with real-time information just as we were speaking. So there will be a real-time update here at the end. In the interest of providing the board more time for their work, I plan to keep tonight's report relatively brief. And I'll start with an update on negotiations with CEA on a successor agreement. Today, the Centennial School District and Centennial Education Association met for interest-based bargaining training. This is the first of a 2-day training facilitated by Janet Gilman and Steve Irwin with the Employee Relations Board. Unlike traditional bargaining, which is characterized by the trading of proposals, this is a collaborative process which is guided by consensus and mutual agreement. I'll go ahead and move on to future topics, but feel free to stop me if there's anything that you want to interject as I go through or ask questions about.
We actually have Director Andrews.
Sorry. Thanks, Vice Chair Fuller. Superintendent Owens, you sent out that superintendent's update on Friday and mentioned about IBB training. And I guess I was kind of surprised. I wasn't sure we'd talked about the different modes of training and of bargaining, I'm sorry. And I was here 3 years ago when we did interest-based bargaining with the Teachers Association. And I can remember it being very time consuming. I am concerned about everybody's burnout level. We've heard that several times from the union, and also I'm fairly certain that the administration is kind of burned out. I'm just a little bit concerned that we would actually be going forward with an intensive process like that. That just wanted to express that concern.
No, that's good. And I can briefly respond to that. And what I'll say is we have today and tomorrow for training. And then the board has an executive session here in early February where we'll talk about different aspects of bargaining as we go into it. And then from there, tomorrow, when we're with the association, we'll talk about the bargaining schedule. At this point, we're establishing the training in anticipation of commencing the bargaining. In a traditional process, that normally starts about a month after the training. So if we were in a normal circumstance, that would be end of February for the first sessions, with the aim of trying to get wrapped up by June. But obviously, current circumstances are not normal circumstances. And so that's going to need to factor into how we schedule that and how we think about how we approach that as well. So at this point, we're approaching the interest-based bargaining, knowing that our contract with CEA ends at the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th. And so we're initiating the process, but we'll have to discuss how that unfolds, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or comments on that particular topic? Great. On Tuesday, January 18th, so last Tuesday, the Boundary Review Committee met to review feedback from the second open house. The parent committee members were requested to provide their thoughts on a small adjustment to the second consensus scenario. It was a small adjustment between Pleasant Valley and Butler Creek, and it affected 3 households, and it would better align with proximal neighborhoods and district transportation routes. Other than that, there was a consensus on the scenario that was brought forward to the second open house, which I've mentioned before, consisted of at least 30 iterations as we went through. I'll be reviewing the recommendation that the committee provided, and I'll be working with Chief Swenson, Director Southerton, and parent members of the committee to develop a presentation to the board to accompany my recommendation for the boundary adjustments at the February 23rd board meeting. So in just under a month, the board will have that presented as the recommendation for boundaries. And so look forward to that piece. And then finally, it would not be a superintendent's update without a COVID-19 update. So I wanted to make sure to provide that. What I'm going to share with you is information from the superintendent's update that went out Friday, but I thought it was important to bring that information here as well in case there's any questions or comments on that. So the first piece is on contact tracing and notification. As shared on Friday, January 14th, the Oregon Health Authority and Multnomah County Health Department released new contact tracing and notification requirements for K-12 schools. Schools have been advised to change course on contact tracing. Oregon no longer considers masked contact in schools, including on school buses, to be an exposure regardless of the distancing. So that's obviously a change, and it has already resulted in quite a substantial limiting of quarantines. This also means that parents may not get a notification if their child is exposed, and we will no longer be sending general community notifications. Since the beginning of the school year, we've shared positive COVID-19 cases with our community on our website, and we continue to update the COVID-19 dashboard on a weekly basis. It was most recently updated this afternoon by Chief Swenson. Any questions on or comments on the contact tracing and notification before I move to the quarantine and isolation? Hearing none. As communicated previously, Multnomah County Public Health updated their isolation and quarantine guidance in alignment with CDC recommendations. These new guidelines have been implemented by Multnomah County and have been adopted by the Centennial School District and other school districts in the Multnomah Education Service District, or MESD. As I imagine you've already heard through media, the CDC has reduced the recommended time for quarantine and isolation for the general public to 5 days. Individuals should continue wearing a well-fitting mask around others at home and in public spaces for an additional 5 days, so days 6 through 10 after the end of their 5-day isolation. All of the information around quarantine and isolation guidance is on our website, and I just wanted to make sure to bring that forward here to the board as well, again, in case there were any questions or comments on those. The final piece, and it's all conjoined here, is our Test to Stay program update. As you know, before winter break, we were advertising that we were going to commence that process. We came back from winter break and there was a whole slew of cases. And so our ability to get that program up and running was compromised by all of the contact tracing that was needing to happen. So I wanted to make sure to provide a test to stay program update. Given the changes to the contact tracing and isolation and quarantine guidelines, test to stay is no longer applicable in most circumstances. There are specific situations that meet the criteria for test to stay, which is determined by MESD and or Multnomah County Public Health. If students or staff develop symptoms during the school day and there's a signed consent form on file, diagnostic COVID-19 testing is available at school sites. Consent forms can be found on our website, and after completing that form, parents submit it to their child's school as soon as possible, and then they're eligible to participate in the test to stay. So there are 3 combined kind of updates there. Director Wright, is there anything that you want to share? I know that you run point on this, and maybe you have some thoughts based on what was shared.
Specifically around the test to stay, or between any of your 3 pieces that you added?
Yeah, I would say test to stay or anything I might have missed in the other components.
Perfect. I'll just add an umbrella that all of the districts have been working collaboratively, as Superintendent Owen said, with public health and with the MESD around the shifts for considering exposures. That is really limiting, and that's part of why there's a change to notifications for families and the communities, because really exposures will be condensed to situations where there may not be masking in place. And so, especially when it comes to athletics, or when it comes to students who are experiencing disability who may not be able to wear masks. And so we're going to keep monitoring the situation with the county, because it is a big shift for everyone, going from so much contact tracing, having big exposures, but getting it whittled down to potentially who would have to quarantine because of vaccinations. And so messages from county health has been around risk reduction and trying to get used to living with COVID. And this is new for all of us. And so we're working together to get a handle on how this will be implemented. And we've had a couple situations at the high school where we already had to quickly contact trace, and they led to no exposures because everybody was wearing their masks, or potentially they might not be wearing them. So wearing masks, continuing to do the spacing, continuing to do our other mitigation measures are really going to continue to help with that as well.
Great, thank you. The last piece I'll bring up, and this is why I mentioned that the report was kind of being drafted on the spot. I have let the board know through various communications over the last month or so, especially after we've gotten back from winter break, that we're having service issues as it pertains to a variety of functions in our district. It's no secret. What we've seen so far as impacts is the board elected to convert student contact day into a staff in-service day a couple of Fridays ago. So that happened. More recently, as you're aware, Powell Butte transitioned into a week of distance learning, and that was based on a high level of absences at the school that were materializing kind of in real time the day before that week began. In this case, and this is something I had mentioned in terms of district-wide impact as it affects our district operations, we're having an issue in transportation right now. And so just for context, for about the last month or so, and Director Southerton can kind of color in between the lines here, I'll give you the kind of high level, but for the last month or so, we've been making a concerted effort to combine bus routes due to driver shortage. In this case, we have our general staffing issues that have improved over the year in terms of transportation, but we're also seeing a significant COVID impact in the department in terms of positive cases, and then also with just various COVID related impacts with childcare and other things that affect that, to the point where tomorrow, for the first time, we will have a service failure in our transportation department, which means that we will not have enough bus drivers to cover all of the routes that we have to cover in the district. And so that means that provided we have school, and that's the plan that we'll talk about with you now, is school being in session, we will have some students that will not be picked up to go to school based on that service failure. And so that was something that our cabinet was talking about just about a minute before we got onto this call, is about how to address that particular component. And so our plan at this point is to contact specific families that are on particular routes where we cannot serve and inform them. And this is elementary, middle, or high school, because the way our transportation works, it is the same driver that does routes for elementary, middle, and high, that there will not be transportation provided tomorrow. And then we'll be doubling back to see what sort of a longer term plan we might need to employ, given whether this might be a longer term route failure. I'll let Director Southerton speak to this piece, but I wanted to make sure the board was aware.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens. You captured the highlights of the plan well, or the challenge. So as discussed, we have been facing a challenge with bus drivers and other staff, as the board is aware, as we spoke about at our meeting just 2 weeks ago. The good news is that we have seen some additional staffing return to buildings with teachers and EAs, but at this point in time, it's heavily impacting our transportation department. Our transportation drivers have been amazing. We've been combining routes. We've been doing everything possible that we can. They have been, the heart and soul of the department, making sure that kids are getting to school safely and getting home safely. But we're at a point right now where we're not able to service every route tomorrow. We impact the, we estimate the impact will be 2 routes at this point in time. And it's Route 8 and Route 17. And as Superintendent Owen stated, we're in the process of creating communication and notifying families so they can make other arrangements or try to make other arrangements to get their students to school tomorrow. We estimate that the overall impact is approximately 200 students out of our 5,600 students in the district, and about half of those ride the bus on any given day. So it's about 200 students out of 3,000 that would be impacted tomorrow.
We wanted to make sure to offer that update because it was happening in real time and there wasn't a better mechanism to communicate that to the board, and we're in the process of working on that. But we also offer the opportunity for any questions or comments you might have about that particular update.
I've got a question. Oh, I didn't raise my hand though. Real quick, do we know what, is there a demographic of neighborhood of students that this is impacting more than others?
That's a good question. Currently, those routes service Centennial High School and Pleasant Valley, and Centennial Middle School for Route 8. And Route 17 services Centennial High School, Pleasant Valley, and Powpew. So the impacts are on the south end of the district, which is our largest, less populated side of the district. And so those routes just inherently travel, a much longer distance and take a lot longer for those routes. So in essence, in effort to be as efficient and transfer as many students as we possibly can, we're just kind of pulling in routes a little bit so we can maximize the number of students that we can transport.
Awesome. What we're going to do is we're going to go around with who put their hands up first. And I believe I saw Director Andrews' hands up first. Then we're going to do Director Shields and then Director Lynn. Thank you for your guys' time. But Director Andrews, you go first.
Thank you. Are you taking volunteer drivers? I mean, I can definitely pick up kids, and I live in the outskirts of the district where it's pretty dispersed houses. I'd be happy to pick up some kids and take them to school tomorrow and take them back afterwards too.
Well, thank you, Director Andrews. I definitely appreciate that sentiment. As you may imagine, transporting students, pupil transportation is highly regulated. And,
yeah,
we would want to make sure that we're offering well-trained drivers that are going to, not that you're not, I'm sorry, I'm not qualified to drive a bus either. So
no, I'm not driving a bus. I mean, just picking them up in the car.
So I appreciate that. We're going to be working with our families and seeing what we can do. We understand that Portland Public has ran into a similar situation. And so they've working with families to see if we can offer some kind of support for transportation or other resources potentially to help.
I'd be happy to drive my own car and take kids to school and take them back home if that's needed.
Thank you. I appreciate that offer. I will get back to you after talking with our transportation supervisor.
Thank you, Director Andrews, for that very kind gesture. Director Shields?
The question I would have is students that are impacted by this, how is that recorded for them in terms of their attendance and or, we keep records about our students and children's records of attendance. That's number one. And number two, if we're in this kind of situation, I live in the Pleasant Valley area. I used to have a directory for almost all of the parents because of sports. I'll be honest with you. It was our sports list, and we could have called and got carpooling together and doing those kind of things because of those types of connections. And I don't know what this, kind of in what we can do or what's kind of this, underpinning for our parents who live in the more rural parts of our district, but it is something to consider. It may not just be a bus driving shoulders. It could be lots of other things, and what might we be able to do? So that's kind of two questions in one.
That is our hope, that by notifying parents as soon as possible, that they will be able to carpool and work together with each other to pool resources to work on possible solutions to the issue. So it's our hope that we will get feedback from the board and then be able to put that communication out kind of in real time for our folks so that they can make adjustments and alternative plans and look for their backup plans. We certainly don't take it lightly. We understand the impact this has on families. Again, I just want to sing the praises of the transportation department. They've done everything possible they can to serve our students and make sure they get to school safely in the morning and get home safely in the afternoon. We've now exceeded what we're able to do, unfortunately.
And penalties for absences? No. If I couldn't get my kid to school,
No,
then
that
my
would be,
child is not going to be held accountable.
that would be excused.
Okay. Thank you, Director Shields, for that question, that last question. I was about to ask that, so thank you very much. Director Lynn?
Sure, yeah, I had three things really quick, and this is back on the COVID thing. Can we get an update on mask policy adherence, and how that is going, as we, see with COVID fatigue, with parents, some people getting misinformation about masks and stuff like that. I'd like to hear about the mask policy adherence. When we talked about the consent form for testing, I would like to hear about whether it comes to testing or vaccinations. It's my understanding that under 18 to a certain age does not need parental consent to be tested or vaccinated. And how are we doing on informing those young adults that they don't need parental consent to get vaccinated or tested? And then finally, if we are really at the crisis point where buses are not being, buses aren't available to pick up kids, I'd like to know what the bus drivers are asking for, what they think would be getting them back on the road. And do we need to consider telling parents, if they choose to not vaccinate kids that can be vaccinated, are they the ones that need to find alternative transportation to school? So those three things I'd like addressed.
Yeah, and I think we can maybe take those on the spot and maybe in reverse order. I think the dilemma with the bus routes wouldn't be so strategic or couldn't be so isolated. I mean, you're going to have route failures that are going to include students that are vaccinated and not vaccinated. And so I don't know that we would be capable of routing based on vaccination status. I think that would be my initial answer. I don't know if Director Southerton has an added thought on that.
No, I think that's accurate because we'd have to gather the information first, which right now we can only do on a volunteer basis, is my understanding, because it's protected health information. So families can only elect to self-disclose if they want to or not. Denise, feel free to jump in there if I've got that wrong. And then the distribution is likely. Once we have the data, we could know for sure. It's a great question, but I would imagine it's likely to be spread throughout the district and not be just a specific area here or there where we could curtail the route. As mechanics.
As far as mask adherence, we've had this conversation with our administrators, and the initial impression is that mask adherence has actually gotten better since winter break, because I think that there's a real and legitimate fear that exists around the prevalence of the Omicron variant and the amount of community spread that there is, and more of a realistic fear that people can catch it. I'll defer to Principal Scott Aguirre, who I think may have some similar sentiments to share there.
Yes, thank you, Director Lynn. The mask, I would say that mask adherence is slightly better, that people are more conscientious about keeping the mask over their nose and mouth. I mean, they were wearing masks. Kids were wearing masks. We don't have a lot of protest against masks. It was more slippage and things like that. And they're more conscientious about it now. And I can answer the question on the testing. The nurse is well aware that students can give their own consent for testing. She does try to contact parents, just because otherwise you tend to get some calls back, like, why'd you test my kid? But she doesn't prevent kids from being tested if she can't get hold of a parent. So if a student seeks a test and they're of the right age, and it's that 14, 15-year-old or freshman that's the one, she does test them. We don't give vaccinations ourselves. That's done through the school-based health center. And so I can't answer how much they promote the fact, but I as I recall, that it's clear that they don't need. When we transported last spring for vaccinations, we made it clear that the students that were 15 and older could consent for themselves.
I follow up really quick.
No problem.
And I'm sorry too, I hate to take time. The mask enforcement you said is better, but we've always been told that it's great. So that seems to concern me. With the consent form, are we notifying or like giving the student a prospective option whether they want their parents notified or not? Or are we putting some kids in the spot where they might want to get it and their parents are all against it and they don't want their parents notified? And how much are we giving them, making sure that their privacy is respected on that? And then that final point, and then the final third point on the bus vaccination, I'd really like a 100% answer on Sutherland's comment about it being private information. It's my understanding we can, although we have never approached the issue, we can mandate vaccinations. It's not private information, and it's not voluntary whether people tell us or not if we institute a requirement.
We can definitely research the question that you're asking, and we'll make sure to do that. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Let's see. Oh, yes, Director Harden.
Yes, just popcorning solutions for the busing. Do we have the ability to rent some charter buses for the next, until we get out of this time period where we're short drivers, short routes? I know it's all real time and we're trying to figure out solutions. So I just wanted to popcorn that up, maybe get a couple charter buses to get us through this tight time frame.
That's a great question, Director Harden. We have been working with partners for select routes that people are licensed to help us out with and drive. So we've had Echo Shuttle and others for some activity buses and for athletics. And then we've had some partners that can help with some of our routes that have fewer students, some of our special ed routes. At this point in time, they do not have additional resources for us to supplement our regular drivers, but we continue to explore every option.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any more questions? Seeing that we have none. Superintendent Owens.
That was my final update for the superintendent's report. So that concludes my superintendent's report. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. So then the next thing that we have is the state report card report. And this is again to Superintendent Owens and Director of Curriculum and Student Learning, Maureen Callahan.
Great. I'll go ahead and tee things off here. And it looks like Mo has the presentation queued up.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. The video for me tonight is not working, so we'll get this done regardless, but my apologies.
So we wanted to provide a brief district graduation rates presentation. We haven't had one in some time. We did not have one last year. Normally they come with the school reports. And so it's been a little bit since the board has had a graduation rate report. And we thought it was timely to provide one, especially given that the state provided the graduation rate data last week. If you had the chance to take a look at the way that the state presented that information, it's in pretty raw format. It's a data table. And so we wanted to make sure to provide the board and the community the opportunity to see some of the graphs that we put together internally based on that graduation rate data. We're going to keep it pretty high level and quick. There's kind of a lot of graphs and charts here, and you can get lost in that. It's uploaded in board book, and so it's there for your review as you'd like. And then feel free to ask questions after you review the data, even if it's not on the spot tonight, after the fact, and we'll make sure to get the responses that you need based on that. So like I said, we're going to kind of keep a perky pace here, and I'll go ahead and have Mo click to the next slide. And obviously, this is a slide that we share often when we share presentations around our student achievement, because it's an important component of making sure that the efforts that we're doing related to our strategic plan are contributing to the outcomes that are happening for students in terms of their graduation and completion of school. What you'll see in the coming charts is not only graduation in 4 years, but then also 5-year completion. And that's actually where we'll start the presentation, is 5-year completers, because at the end of the day, we're looking for students to have completed high school. We would prefer that they do it in 4 years as a graduate, but we also recognize that that is not always possible for a variety of reasons. And so we'll share information both in terms of 5-year completion, 4-year graduation, district-wide data, and then also Centennial High School specific. And keep in mind, just because we have one high school that's a physical school, we also have other avenues for students beyond the physical high school, which includes Centennial Virtual Academy. They also include our component schools such as Rosemary Anderson, Open School, and other locations where Centennial students are served as well. And so it is not just one location. And so we'll try to keep the information high school specific and then also broader as well, so that you get that context.
Great. Thank you, James. So just a little bit about the structure. So it is dense information. We've got 8 graphs to share with you, along with some data statements that'll help just kind of navigate through the quantity of the information. We'll start with district view. So the first 4 slides will be a district perspective, and then the next 4 slides will be specific to Centennial High School. And then within that, we'll focus on the 5-year completers, and then we'll look at the 4 years. But right now, Mari Scott-Aguirre, she's going to just share some key information that'll help you navigate the data as we go through. Mari, if you want to jump in and join us.
Yep. Directors, the first thing is just talking about what are the 5-year cohorts and the 4-year cohorts. And the 5-year cohorts are those students that started in 9th grade and graduated within 5 years. And the state tracks, if someone transfers to another school within the state, they get picked up and taken out of our cohort. If they go to another state, we need to have evidence that they actually enrolled in another school in another state in order to remove them from our cohort. Those students who graduate with regular diplomas or honors diplomas or modified diplomas are part of the graduation group. If they graduated with an alternative certificate, like a certificate of completion, they are not considered graduates. Or if they earned their GED, they're not considered graduates. And there's some really specific things on tracking. We try to keep really good track of records and follow up on students when they leave us in order to figure out where they've gone. And sometimes it's moving out of state, and not everybody requests records. So it's a bit of a, it's like a mystery in following up on all of that to figure out where kids are and follow up and get them re-enrolled if they need to be. So that's some of the basics on who's in the 4-year cohort and how that gets adjusted. And students that move into our district get added to our cohorts for graduation, and who's in a 5-year cohort.
Thanks, Maury. So this is the first graph. This is a district view 5-year, and it's by race and ethnicities. Just to kind of give you a chance to orient yourself, there are some data statements on the left, and you can see the data for the last 4 years in the graph, and every graph has the same structure. Let's see, I think one thing that's notable here is keeping in mind the pandemic. And so when we think about 1920 and 2021, and then before 2017 to 2019. Just big picture, a couple other things that'll help navigate you through with the races and the ethnicities. When you see on the far right, you see underserved races and ethnicities, and that is defined by the state as students who are included in Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islands. So that just gives you a concept of what that means. And you can see that some increases and decreases on this are students of color. You can see, for example, our Hispanic and Latino increase this year compared to 1920, some other increases, and then also some decreases. Looking at the district view by other student groups. And when we say other student groups, these are academic programs for our students. And so again, just to clarify in terms of some definitions, your English learners anytime in high school. So if at any point in time in their high school time, they were identified as an English learner, that's what that means. Combined disadvantage, that includes students who are members of at least one of the following groups, and that could be historically underserved by race and ethnicity, students with disabilities, economic disadvantaged, and current English learners. So that'll help you with that. And so with each graph, I'm just going to share, again, a 30,000 foot view here. As you look at you can see the data statements on the left. So for this one, really graduation rates increase for most groups compared to 1920. I'm gonna move to the next one. This is a district view for 4-year by race and ethnicities. And as you look at this graph, you can see increases with our multiracial students and for our American Indian, Alaska Native, you can see they're missing a 4th column there, and we didn't have any data. So for that year, there were none. But all the others, you can see that there was a decrease from 1920 to 2021. For the district, 4-year by other student groups, let's see here. We've got increases with the students with disabilities. You can see talented and gifted was maintained. And then the other groups over the course of 2 years, there was a decrease. Moving to high school. So all of the rest of these graphs are specific to high school. 5-year by race and ethnicity. You can see in the left column there, all students. We've got a tick up there from 86% to 88%. Also, our Hispanic Latino students increased from 80 to 89% over the last 2 years, and an increase for underserved races and ethnicities from 81 to 87. Multiracial students decreased a tinge, 85 to 83% from 1920 to 2021. Moving on to the 5-year group for other student groups. For the most part, all the student groups except for one either maintained their 1920 percentage or increased in 2021. Our migrant students, which for 2021, there were less than 5 students, decreased from 88 to 50%. Moving to high school for 4 years by race and ethnicity. Excuse me. There's a decrease for all students on the 2021 after an increase in 1920. Let's see here. Our American Indian, Alaska Native, and multiracial students, there was an increase from 1920 to 2021. Our Black African American students and our Hispanic Latino students, both groups decreased over the last 2 years. And then the last one in terms of high school 4 years by other student groups, you can see students with disabilities, that's the third set, have had consistent gains over the past 4 years. Our English learners, anytime in high school, that decrease from 1920 to 2021. And then also our combined disadvantaged, there was a decrease as well. This is just but a glimpse and very dense information. There's much more work for us to do. I have not had the opportunity to compare our data to state or other districts yet, but that's one thing that we'll look at. I'd like to ask Mari again to share current practices, things that we're currently doing, and then also things that we're considering for the future.
Yes, excuse me. Yes, thank you. I also want to point out, because this was a big change for us with CVA started, CVA's data is in with CHS's data, and that's something that we never had before. So our 5-year data is really mostly without CVA, and our 4-year data is with CVA as part of the group. Current practices that we have to work on increasing graduation rates is work on freshmen on track and freshman teaming. This is work we've done every year for the last 4 years, except last year we couldn't have freshmen teaming with the schedule that we ran. That pays off 4 years later, not during the year you're doing it. We have a student intervention team that works on tier 2 interventions school-wide. We have a care team that works on tier 3 interventions, so the top of the triangle, that works on school-wide. Our leadership team, our PLCs, and the curriculum adoption work is working on tier 1, so working on our overall curriculum and instructional methodologies to make students successful in school. For the last year and this year, we've had an advisory, and students keep the same teacher for advisory for all 4 years. So it forms lasting relationships. It's a place that we can deliver social emotional learning and comprehensive school guidance counseling, which is the counseling beyond your guidance counselor. We are working with Director Wright and the counselors at developing a comprehensive counseling program, and they work on grad plans for seniors and tracking seniors' progress to make sure that they graduate on time. And there's through a district grant, there's a reconnections coordinator who, for those students that are either struggling mightily or they might have already dropped out, she reconnects them to school, finds the appropriate situations and supports, and gets them re-enrolled and making progress towards graduation. And actions for the future is we need to keep working on freshmen on track and working with freshman teaming. It's proven to be effective, and there's a lot of research behind it, and we've had some good success over time with it. We had a lot of cuts for the 2020-2021 school year. Those cuts have been restored. And positions like the Dean of Students help with the tracking of students and students' attendance issues and keeping track of that. We need to continue to work to make the CVA, CHS connection seamless because students move back and forth. And traditionally, online academies have really low graduation rates. They don't have separate data to pull out, but we want to make that connection seamless so that students don't get lost and that they earn enough credits to graduate on time. And we need to continue to work on our partnerships. We have a variety of partnerships that we work with. And partners have also been affected by the pandemic. It was much more difficult to do work with Sun last year, and they can be a connection for students that might be their deepest connection to schools, their work with Sun or with REAP or something else. And so we'll continue to work on those as ways to connect our students. Continuing to work on the alternative options as a system. And then we're at the high school, we're working towards a trimester system, which will have the opportunity to earn an additional half credit over the course of each year. So that students would be able to earn 7.5 credits rather than 7, which should also help over time with graduation rates.
Thank you, Mari. And just one additional piece of information in terms of Centennial Virtual Academy. Jenny Lucas oversees that program, and she was able to look at the data today for 2021, and it looks like it's 68% students graduating. So with that, I'm happy to take we're happy to take questions and/or requests to dig a little deeper or for additional information.
And Director Callahan, I would just offer that CVA Principal Jenny Lucas and CTC Principal Denise Wright are both here as well in case they have anything they wanted to add to the presentation.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Perfect. Let's see. So we had Director Solaski first. And I believe we're supposed to be doing questions, correct? Yeah. So yes, you're first.
Thanks. I had a question about the advisory that you talked about that follows the student throughout. How often are those meetings happening, and are they happening, like, is it a one-on-one thing or is it a group advisory? Kind of, what does that look like?
Oh,
it runs like, I muted myself, sorry. It runs like a class. This year it's a 50-minute class period. We're last year it was twice a week. This year it's once a week. Because last year we had a completely different schedule with having the quads and everything else. So this year it's once a week. We're looking at how it would fit into the trimester schedule. We'll still have it. We don't know how it'll fit in, like if it's going to be 35 minutes or what, but we'll continue to work on that.
Awesome. And I believe Director Harden was next.
Yeah, were the standards adjusted in 1920 and 2021, the graduation standards, because of the outbreak?
The 1920 school year had a fair amount of adjustments. The grading in the spring, grades were sort of frozen at 6 weeks into the second semester. And everybody's needing to meet essential skills was waived for both years, and the personalized learning. But the grades weren't frozen. Grades were regular last year in the 2021 school year.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. And I think Director Andrews, you had your hand raised.
Thanks, Vice Chair Fuller. So Principal Scott Aguirre, when we had the last presentation on this, when I was on the board, you were relatively new and hadn't seen a full cohort go all the way through 4 years at Centennial High School, but I believe now you've been there for 4 years, haven't you?
At 7.
7, wow, yeah. So what changes have you seen over time with regard to the graduation rate and the achievements that we've made? It used to be a major effort, and I'm sure it still is, but it's not got quite as high a profile given the pandemic. What changes have you seen?
We've generally had increasing graduation rates. This last year is the first year, I believe there might have been a tiny drop one year, like 0.3% for the overall. Within the different student groups, you see more volatility because there's smaller ends and smaller. So you'll see more volatility within there, but generally we've had increasing graduation rates. This year will be the first year that our freshman teaming will have gone all the way through with 4 years, because that started 4 years ago. And that freshman teaming went quite well. The second year of freshman teaming was the first year of the pandemic. So we haven't had as clear a cohort of that yet. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. They've also been affected by the pandemic. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And then I believe Director Shields has a question.
Yes.
All right, it's kind of for this clarity between the CHS and CVA, since the Centennial Virtual Academy, and Jenny, you may want to weigh in on this as well. We created it under a great deal of stress. I mean, it was just like go, which frankly, you and your staff have done an amazing job of filling that incredible need. Now, with maybe the pandemic waning, what types of discussions do we need to have to help with this, relationship between our more traditional high school environment and our virtual academy for our high school aged students? What can we do to support our students who may start in one and move to another, or back and forth? What kind of visioning are we doing for that cooperative agreement? I mean, not that there was disagreement. I didn't mean to imply that,
No,
but just moving forward.
Number one, before Principal Lucas answers, I will say that's a really good question, because we've been having internal discussions around that, and they have a plan. So she'll be sharing that plan.
Thanks. Yeah, I that is an excellent question, and it's been on our minds, and we've been having conversations about it. What's been really interesting to me about this is last year, CVA seemed to serve a certain need, and we did some visioning work on what it could be and what it could turn into. And then when we came into this year, that visioning has only worked out partially, because we're discovering new needs for online learning and for that remote learning. And so I think this is an exciting time that we're in, because we can have conversations, I think, as a district around what a virtual learning environment or option could look like, and what needs it meets for our students. So we're discovering some new things this year, and having that hybrid model where kids can be partially in a neighborhood school, partially online, has been another exciting avenue. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here for us to look at ways to serve our families better.
And will you be sharing some of that with us, and maybe as a report in more detail, Superintendent Owens? Is this something that we could?
Yeah, once we do a programmatic assessment, what we'll do is we will bring that forward. And I was just looking today, and around this time last year, we had we had initially had CVA on a 1 year. So we opened it for 1 year. We didn't know what was going to happen. Then last year we renewed it for 1 year. And so our thought is we would bring forward a report as far as our assessment of what enhancements, improvements, and integration with the high school we need to do, and what we need to do in terms of potential adjustments of our format at the elementary middle level, have those kind of recommendations there, present that as a report, and then also at the same time, just based on the budget committee feedback that we got last week, it sounded like there was a resounding consensus to keep this format going forward. It wasn't clear at that time in terms of the duration of how far forward we want to bring that. We've been going year to year. Do we want to keep going year to year? Do we want to cast this out longer? Does casting out longer give us a better chance at making a longer term plan? You know, those are considerations that the board will need to make, but we want to first present to you our programmatic assessment before the board makes a consideration of what to do next. We heard it sounds like we would want to re-up for at least a year. I don't want to presume that. That's the board's decision, but just based on budget committee, that's what I felt like we heard. But I think you would be able to make a better decision once you had a better assessment of the program enhancements that we intend to make based on learned experience and engagement that we've made with stakeholders.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions for this particular line item? Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome. Okay, we're going to confirmation items. And I believe everyone has looked at their confirmation items. Yes, Director Andrews.
I'd like to request that before we move on this, that I asked that you move the number 6.6.2, the elementary classroom projector replacements, to new business and out of the confirmation items, because I have some questions and I think we might have a discussion on this that would go beyond just a confirmation. Are you okay with that?
That's fine with me. Is there any other people that have any objection to this? Is there a motion?
I'll move that we confirm all confirmation items except 6.6.2 elementary classroom projector replacements.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Andrews to move all confirmation items except line item 6.6.2, elementary classroom projector replacements, seconded by Director Shields. All in favor, say aye.
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 Awesome. Okay, that is unanimous for our board secretary. And we will.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We will put this under athletic facilities. Okay, so on to new business.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Vice Chair, you did not vote to confirm the confirmation items though, so you need to go back and have a vote on that.
Oh, okay,
Sure.
I'm sorry. So vote to confirm confirmation items now.
I'll move we vote to confirm the confirmation items.
Was that a motion? I'm sorry, David. I stepped on you.
Sorry, yeah. Yes, that was a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Who was the second? Okay, yeah, okay, yay.
That was,
So,
was that
that was Director,
Rose?
no, Shields.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So Director Lynn motions to confirm the confirmation items while Director Shields seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Awesome. And that is unanimous. All right, so we are going down to new business. Now, new business, just wanted to let you all know that this is just gonna be, oh yeah, I also need, that's a good thing. I have like 2 things that I need you guys to do. So in terms of the return to in-person board meetings discussion, I really want to make sure that we have everyone here for this discussion because it's going to affect everyone. And right now we do not have Chair Curry. I would like to see if we can get a motion to table this until next meeting.
Question?
Yes.
In light of that as well, I'd like to go through and maybe with Superintendent Owens' comments as well. I believe the same thing is true as you described, right? For the in-person meetings. I think the email discussion raises that same level of concern that we would want all board members here to be available for that discussion. I don't know about the policy committee format. I don't know who can speak to that, and I don't know if Superintendent Owens is ready for that since it has both names. So those are my questions.
Yeah.
What we might want to continue, other things to pull.
Yeah. So Superintendent Owens, I believe, was going to take on the duty of doing the policy committee format discussion. Let me just double check with him if that's still okay.
What I would say there is just briefly, Vice Chair Fuller, and then we can kind of determine where to go from here, is on the policy committee format discussion. That was originally just Chair Curry, and then I added my name just to contribute to that. What I can offer is that it may be helpful if we engage in that discussion just to kind of rough out some general ideas that we can hand over to our OSBA trainer, Vince, and just say, hey, here's the rough idea that we have around this concept, and then have him based on, okay, it sounds like if you want to do that, here's a way you might proceed forward, so that there isn't like a definite decision in terms of how we want to structure our policy committee, but just some general ideas of what the format might be, and then engage deeper during the training.
Okay.
Sounds good. Yep. And then I would say for the board email discussion, I would defer to the board in terms of how you want to format that, if you want to have that now or wait.
Well, I have no problem. I know that I have talked to Chair Curry about the board email discussion, and I have no problem. I think we just wanted to get a feel for where people are at about getting a board email that's connected to our names, and if we wanted it to be put on the what do you call it, our website next to our name.
Yep.
So that was really the whole entire conversation, and that was what we wanted to. So what we can do is we'll table both return to in-person board and the board email discussion, and we'll have folks think over about what they would like to see in those discussions. And then for the 7.21, 7.24, and then of course we go back up to the 6.6.2. That'll be what we'll do. Is that okay? Can I have a motion to table those 2 items from new business, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a motion by Director Shields to table line items 7.2.2 as well as line item 7.2.3. Seconded by Director Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. And then now we will continue on with new business. So we have for our first part of the new business, and just let you know, this is just, we're doing just discussion. So we're not going to make, I feel like it's not needed to make any decisions because especially for the policy committee format, besides giving the structure that Superintendent Owens asked for, but yeah. So yeah, let's talk about this. Superintendent Owens, can you sort of give us like an outline of what you
Yep.
are looking for?
Happy to do that. Yeah, thank you. So this discussion is just in terms of how we want to format as a board and superintendent and cabinet, how we bring policies forward. We have our fall policy update that has roughly 50 policies, and then we're getting a fresh batch soon. And so we have quite a few that we'll need to sort through in the coming months here. So it's important that we have a structure that the board is comfortable with in terms of how we proceed. Our process has evolved over the years, and most recently, the process has involved having a first read, second read format, and established board members who were here for previous boards may be able to speak as we open up this discussion as to the merits of the previous functioning. And I think that there has been an increased interest in this board to have more board director involvement in the crafting of policies. And so that is something that a policy committee can allow for, is for board members to be able to have insight and contribution to the development of the policy, aside from just considering it during a board meeting. In a first read, second read format, basically the way that that works is the district gets the customized boilerplate policies from OSBA, makes customizations based on the way that they're offered from OSBA, and makes decision points there. We as a cabinet weigh in on an individual director. So Director Wright may have things that deal with special education or health and safety. Dr. Katsuda might have things dealing with complaints or employee elements as well. And so each director has policies that are within their domain, and they run point on those. They make the customizations based on those and then bring those to our cabinet. Our cabinet is superintendent plus the directors. We take a look at it and say, okay, it looks like in the shape that we like it to go to the board for consideration for a first read. The board takes a first read of that policy. At that first read, they will offer their initial feedback on it. They do not need to feel compelled at that point to make a decision as far as that policy is concerned, unless it seems as if it makes sense to just make a motion on the spot. It's a relatively simple change. But in most circumstances, the initial feedback and questions are offered by the board. Maybe there's additional direction that's given to that director. The director takes that back and incorporates those suggestions and then brings that forward for a second read the next board meeting. During that second read, if there's nothing substantial that's changed based on that initial read, and there's no board directors that have asked the cabinet director any questions in the meantime, that may go on the confirmation items. And so it may not go for a second read. It may just be voted on in confirmation items and pass that way. If there are customizations that have been changed based on board input, it may come back for a second read. And that might look like we've had the chance to reflect. We've had the chance to check with legal counsel. We've had the chance to check with the policy expert. Here's their recommendations. And it's sort of like what we just did with the Every Student Belongs policy that was approved last time. Incorporating a policy committee would be different in that process. And that's where the board needs to weigh in terms of what that looks like and at what point in that process the board has involvement. I could see it looking something like this, but I don't want to say this is what it is because I have not worked in a policy committee format before. And so we would need the expertise of others and the opinions and ideas from the board members in terms of what that looks like. But what that could look like is similar format that I described previously. So let's take Director Wright, for example. She has a policy on communicable diseases. That's one of the policies that she deals with. She has that policy. She gets the boilerplate policy from OSBA. She makes the initial run at the customizations based on maybe consulting with MESD or consulting with public health on their recommendations of how it might work. Then we convene a policy committee, and I don't know, does this policy committee meet regularly? Does it meet as at an ad hoc basis based on the need of that policy? You know, how does that format work? Director Wright, and oftentimes in districts, the assistant superintendent will be the standing member on such a committee. And so you want to be considerate of the time demands of an individual administrator with that as well. If we're talking about 50 policies plus a new batch, that's a lot of policies for one director to sit through. Nevertheless, that is a typical format, is to have your assistant superintendent as your standing director in that format, and then have the director for whom the policy is bring that forward. And then in the policy committee, you would have less than a quorum, so 3 or fewer board members who would be a part of that policy committee, and they would help in the actual drafting of the policy. And so your policy committee could take shape in terms of, do you want the initial director to work that policy a little bit? Do we want to take them fresh, at the policy committee table? At what point does the policy committee get involved? And that's something where I think that our board trainer, Vince Adams, may have some input in terms of what he's seen, because I understand that he's worked in a policy committee format before. So I'll leave it there. I just wanted to offer some initial thoughts from my perspective on current practice and what practice might look like, but then I'll turn it over to the board for further discussion.
May I make one comment?
Yes.
They come in to me first. And when the pandemic first hit, we made a decision, and I can't remember who decided and how we decided, but we made the decision to make sure that we did highly recommended and required policies, and we left the rest of them, we kind of let the rest of them go because everything was in flux. So I'm putting that out there too. There's a list of 50. Do we need to go after all of them, or do we need to go after the most important ones? Just a question.
Thank you, Board Secretary Jordan. Awesome. So this brings up the question. How do we want to really, because coming from my standpoint, the reason why I would say it's important to have a policy committee is because we want to make sure that what we are agreeing to sign on to when the policies are coming down the pike. We want to make sure that this is working for our district. And so I did see your hand up, Director Andrews. I will be getting to you. So I think that we should start thinking about, and maybe we can start the brainstorming of it now, and as we continue to think about this. But I think it would behoove us to create a policy committee with just 2 or 3 members, like Superintendent Owen said, and figure out how we can, what we all can give so we can do this correctly. Yes, Director Andrews, sorry.
I agree with you. I think it would be good to have a policy committee. However, that's a lot of policies for them to screen. I was happy with the first and second read practice that the board has used in the past. And I'm wondering if we could go forward with that practice, but then if we see a policy like we did at the last meeting that said, well, this policy needs some work, we don't agree with how it's been addressed at OSBA, that we punt it to the policy committee. And so therefore they're the exception rather than the rule on most of these policies, because most of them are pretty perfunctory and just have a few tweaks and then they're approved and they're gone. And in fact, sometimes we approve them on the first read because they are just so basic, okay? And then check off the list and it's done, and we're up to date. So I'd hate to see everything go through a policy committee before it came to the board. I think I'd prefer it the other way around. It goes to the board and then it goes to the policy committee if we can't, we don't want to do wordsmithing in the meetings, right? If we're just not happy with the process. So that I'm just throwing that out there for an option.
Awesome. And then what we'll also do is just to make sure that I get everyone's voice on the matter, we're going to go through each person. So Director Shields, I saw your hand up, so I was like, yeah.
And here I am. I agree with Director Andrews, and I especially do not like the idea that our assistant superintendent would have to chair basically a policy committee when, Tasha, this is not anything to say against you or the position, but you're not all be all know all about everything that is in, Maureen's, knowledge base, Denise's knowledge base, Director Southerton's knowledge base. If we had a policy committee, an ad hoc policy committee where, what did you say, Claudia, punt the things that are really giving us pause and we really want to chew on it, that we have.
It's
two or
an
three boards.
exception-based, it's an exception-based committee.
And that 3 people say, yeah, I'm really willing to chew on that with the appropriate cabinet member director who really has the in-depth knowledge. Because what I've learned over my time here on the board is that there's some cases where there's very little that we can say or do. These are policies that Oregon, the OSBA gives us because it keeps us whole, right, with the legislative mandates, if you will. That doesn't mean we can't say something in addition to, and this board has footnoted, if you will. We couldn't change the policy, but we added a footnote of a piece of information that we wanted to have added. And I think if we feel strongly about something like that in a policy, then it should be reviewed by 2 or 3 of us who really want to delve into it and come back to our directors and say, okay, we've had this conversation with our content expertise on the cabinet. Now we have a better idea. We'd like to present this to you. And again, first read, second read if we needed it, depending on the length of it. So just a slight modification to maybe what Claudia said, but Claudia, I think you captured it very well.
Thank you, Director Shields. All right, Director Harden, do you have any words of wisdom?
I have never worked on a policy committee before, but that's okay. I have enjoyed the first read, second read, because it gives you time to chew on it. But with as many policies as we have, and as stacked as our meetings already are, I think a policy committee is a great idea for potential solution. Claudia's idea is a pretty good one, where if there's any doubt or any revisions needed, we say, okay, we need to revise this. Let's send it to the policy committee. And one idea, just popcorning things, is what if a couple of board members are assigned to a director, and then they would work. That would be like, I'd be with Denise, and me and another board member would work on any policies that were put to Denise's committee. And a couple were with Director Southerton, and a couple were with Cassie, whoever it may be, just as a potential idea. Like, we're assigned to a director where if policies get sent their way, then we're there to support them and talk about it. That way, it's not always the same people. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I like that idea as well, too. Let's see. We have Director Solowski.
I'm not really sure. I think that I can see the benefits of both, and I think that some form of a hybrid might be most effective of everyone's time. I did have one question, and that is, somebody had mentioned in 2020, 2021, we only adopted the policy changes that were essential. And so then that just begs the question for me, are there non-essential policies that we need to revisit, or those, did we just accept those? I guess I might need a little more information there.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, I wasn't here back in the I had just popped on. So I'm probably gonna lean on you, Director Shields, for this. But if I remember correctly, we have not gone back yet to revisit those policies.
And there have been things that, and when you talk about non-essential things, there are things that are so minor, as Claudia mentioned, which is additions of ORS numbers. Right? Which, okay, necessary to get there. And we were supposed to approve it, but really, when we're in the pandemic environment, there were things that we just said, okay. And OSBA is not breathing down our neck about, things like that, because these things get sent back to OSBA with our, choices. So if it were something that they felt that were important and we didn't move it, they would be checking back with us on that. So they're very good, I will say, on this side of their house. They have been very good.
Appreciate that.
And they do check in with us pretty regularly. And I check in with them with any questions I may have personally, or if someone like Superintendent Owens asks me, check in on certain questions regarding, I go to them. So my understanding is if we don't get to the policies, the nice to have policies, they're okay with that. And we are not outside the bounds of legality. We can't be sued. Those are the things I look at and worry about. We can't be sued. We're not doing anything wrong. The highly recommended and the required policies are things we do need to take care of. So that's just my input there.
Thank you for that distinction. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you. And then we have Director Lynn.
Thank you. And I'm really interested in everybody else's input. I certainly hear the benefits of what I'm hearing from Director Shields and Director Andrews. I'd love to see a training and see how other policy committees work, because I'm a newbie. But I do want our policies to be deliberate. I do want them to be reviewed carefully. There's part of me that would want to look over every policy. Yeah, and I would love to do it. But I mean, sometimes I don't want to overburden people. And like Director Shields said, many policies don't need that intricate kind of detail. But especially when it comes with new legislation coming out, when new legislation gives us the opportunity to pass new policies, I want to be on the forefront of getting those policies passed, even when they're non-essential policies. I want Centennial to be at the forefront of passing progressive policies for our students and staff and everything. So that's what makes me interested in a policy committee. But I also understand just the formal, the good formal policy of just having a first read. And if we don't agree on a second read, we work it and people don't, as long as people don't have a problem punting a policy down on a second read, maybe it doesn't need a policy committee. But I'm very interested in policy committees in terms of moving us forward as much as possible.
Awesome. Thank you all for everything. Oh yeah, Director Shields.
Just in addition to what Director Lynn just said, I really do believe that every board member must look at every policy, period, end of quote. That is our responsibility. We will adhere to that. But I would like the assistance of staff, and as Pam Jordan mentioned to us as well, that rough sort, get that rough sort to us. And if we have to just spend, one of our, we have sometimes two meetings in a month. Usually it's regular and then work session. And maybe we just have a work session, all right, we can get these policies that are, been sitting here. Let's get through these, making sure that they're in our hands. And we've had a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
and there's the sort, right? So that we could get some of this off of the plate right now for, just to move some things forward. I'd certainly be willing to spend a specific period of time to kind of get us back to where we're even. That makes sense.
Yes, it does, Director Shields, and I appreciate that. Yes, so thank you all for this wonderful conversation. I agree as well too. Something around a certain, I think like right now, because everybody is like doing the best they can, living life, trying to live life the best they can. That and like an ad hoc committee, I'm with I like Director Andrews's I option an idea. So something similar to that or something along those lines. So Superintendent Owens, did this help at all?
That's great. What I can do is I can work with Board Secretary Jordan to kind of synthesize and summarize the information, and then provide that to our board trainer to be able to hopefully help integrate that into one of our upcoming trainings.
Perfect. Okay, so let's see. We are at 7.2.4, and this is the athletic facilities. And I will pass it on to Director Paul Southerton.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. So this was just an opportunity to tee up a conversation about athletic facilities in the district. I believe Director Shields motioned at the last meeting to bring this forward in a conversation. Director Shields, did you have particular athletic facilities you wanted to discuss, or would you like an update with bond projects and overall impacts to athletic?
One of the things that I thought too would be important is maybe a little history of how this came to light. And I know Director Harden and I have worked with this concern of our community, our family of athletes. And so I think if we could give you a little perspective on why we're here at this time with this discussion, and then what then could we do from the district perspective with that. And Director Harden, I know you really have been our direct link to our athletics families, and football in particular, which really speaks to the field. And if you could, I think that if you could give that field perspective, and then I could fill in what we did, or either way, or I can fill in what happened from about 2016 forward. So we would have, all of our board directors would have that understanding of what the discussion has been over the bonds discussion as well. So however you, Jess, however you'd like to move forward on this,
Yeah, I'll start just, and correct me if I'm wrong. In 2016, we went out for a school bond. And in that school bond, one of the items on there was to replace the field at the stadium, at the high school stadium. That bond did not pass. And then in 2020, when we went for the bond, we left specifically that athletic field off of the bond, because during our long-term facilities planning and our outreach with the community, it wasn't regarded very highly on the list. So we left that piece off of the bond. We decided for athletics, we would, the swimming pool needed to be replaced, the tennis courts, obviously, the track at Oliver, the track at the middle school had a higher need than that specific, than the high school stadium, the high school fields. And then, but the need for that field it's becoming more urgent. There's lots of challenges to that field. It is, I don't have numbers as far as like the maintenance of it, but you when you're down there, you can see the crown developing on it, and increasingly it's becoming a hazard and a sore spot for our community. So we haven't had the funds for a long time in order to move forward with replacing that field. Well, we have made we have had some property sales recently, and a large chunk of those property sales, the funds go to a fund balance or a board fund balance. Am I using the correct terminology?
Reserve fund.
But we're looking like there will be some above that, some funds above that. And so it's becoming time, like, we need to replace the field, and we have these monies available that we could use to replace the field there, upgrade some of the other athletic facilities that weren't addressed during the bond. And so it's just time to have that discussion on what we can do with those monies.
And the only thing I'd like to add to that is that one of the things we really appreciated, because it was so disheartening when our bond went down in 2016. And yet we knew the needs were, we needed buy-in from our community about what they would be willing to replace. And our athletic community came to the long-term planning process, facility planning process, really wanting to make sure that their voices were heard in relation to those facilities and the turf at the football stadium. And yet they also recognized, after all of those discussions, to be successful with the new 2019 bond, that it might not be raised to that level of, let's put it on the banner and the flyer. And yet we've also known that maybe, just maybe, if there were bond funds, that met all of the needs that we committed to, we looked at the long-term facilities plan, and it was rated, right? Listed as to need. And that turf is just below, somewhere below that line of making it, excuse me. So the commitment from the long-term facilities planners, that 40 plus, people who spent all that time doing that work, and the board at that time was like, then we need to do what we can do. That towards the end of this bond, period, will there be money? And if there isn't all the money, what can we do? Board reserve fund, sale of the property, as Justice mentioned, could be utilized for part of that. Let's engage the community and get this done. And if there's some words for this, guys, and I don't remember what the words are, but it's kind of like when you already have these projects that are going on with the bond right now, and Scott Rose, who's our consultant and overseer of all of this, he's doing all of that work right now. Is there value added by having him doing this, right, while we're coming to the end of these bond projects, to be able to say, yeah, there's money and this is what it would take to do it? Should we be engaging him with that discussion, because he's here now while we're still in the middle of the finishing up the bond? And I think that's where we need Director Southerton's help and Superintendent Owen's help in thinking this through about where we can get it done. Not that it, should we or should we not? We should, my opinion, we should. We need to move forward on replacing the turf at the high school football field. Where those funds come to do it, that's where we need the support from the district office in helping us manage that discussion and the realities of where the monies will be coming from to make it happen, as in sooner rather than later. So that last part was my 2 cents and personal opinion. Thank you for your indulgence.
And Director Shield can speak to Scott Rose and capital project management, and where we can leverage some of the existing construction that's going on and investments that we're making with the bond. So having RNC construction management already under contract, already working with the district, has, proved very helpful and valuable to the district over the last year and a half. As we've experienced winter storm damage, and as we've added on, the need to help boundary adjustments and working with other vendors and partners on that, and then certainly with additional CARES Act and emergency relief funding, ventilation improvements that we'll be doing with schools that were approved by this board, this body, and the adopted budget. And so we can certainly reach out and utilize or work collaboratively with him to leverage those resources again on athletic field improvements and or stadium improvements if that wants to go hand in hand. Timeline, we would be looking at probably a 6-month planning process. You need engineering, you need drainage, you need design, you need permits, you need everything that comes with something, a project of this scale. And so that's to be expected. And then we want to coordinate construction to have a minimal impact on athletics, because we don't have a second field for soccer or for football or for, other folks to practice on or utilize for game days. So just collaborating with our athletic community and making sure that we schedule that appropriately. You brought up a very good point about the existing field. We will, as a district, need to take action at some point or another, whether or not we put turf there or we spend a lot of money getting that field fixed and keep it as grass. There's going to be a large investment for the district that needs to be made to get that field in proper playing condition. As you said, right now, it borderlines on actually being acceptable for OSAA standards. And so we do need to make an investment in that field. The question is, do we want to make an investment that all the other neighboring districts have done for financial and for competitive reasons with sports? Or do we want to, make a different investment to save money and try and just recondition the grass field, knowing that that's probably a short-term solution, and we'd still be back in this situation a few years down the road, because grass fields just need regular maintenance. They need those kinds more often than turf. So that's the question before the board. I think when we consider this option is we have 2 paths to pursue. Which one would the board advise us to? In regards to funding, we are fortunate in that the district has sold the surplus properties somewhat at the top of the market, and we've been able to realize more gains on that surplus on that property than I think was originally forecasted. So we have some extra funds available to invest into our facilities. So I think it is an opportunity. And then lastly, I just say we all know what's going on with inflation right now. So we can certainly wait, but it will never get less expensive than it is now. Most likely it will not get less expensive. I can't tell the future, but we can kind of see where the direction things are going. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have on the funds from the surplus property sales, or on how we would manage, such a project like this, or recommended next steps.
Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the names again. Director Shields, you gave us but do you have any other further?
Just whether or not we would want to, would we need, based on what Director Sutherland just said about timeliness, could he help us knowing what that timeliness looks like the February meeting, so we know what we're talking about in terms of the urgency of our discussion this evening, because we need to come up with a motion and a discussion by when. That's the only other thing I'd like to add, is just when do we need to get this done?
And that's a great question. I don't believe it's urgent, but like I said, we will need to take action in the next 6 to 9 months on the field one way or another. So we have some time to make a decision. I'd reach out to Mari, Scott or Gary. I'm understanding that the best time to start a project would be in late fall, around October or November, based on conversations I believe we've had with the AD. Do you have recollection or thoughts on that?
I don't know the dates. I haven't been part of that discussion as to the timing, so I don't know, what is the best dates for that.
So my understanding is at the end of the football season, which ends in late fall, that would be the best time to kind of mobilize a project so it would have the least impact on those fall sports. And it would hopefully then be done in time for June of the following year, in time to start practice for the summer and fall sports season. We do anticipate it. It's a big project. It will take upwards of 6 months to complete. So working back from that date, and sorry for the long journey, Director Shields, but it would probably take 6 months of planning before we could start construction. So we would have a couple of months of intense planning and design, working with consultants, then putting out for bid, getting competitive bids and contractors lined up, and then moving forward with a construction schedule. So I would recommend that the board provides direction probably by March. I would say by the second meeting in March would get us able to be on that timeline to start a project near the end of this year and into next year. And if we waited towards after that point, we would probably just want to do the field maintenance project and then maybe put turf field off for another year or two, just because, again, we'll need to get that field conditioned football, regardless of what direction the board advises.
Can I interject here briefly,
Yes.
Director Southerton, based on what you just said, two thoughts come to mind. Number one, it seems as if one of the initial directions is for us to come up with a rough project planning timeline that we can offer to the board sooner than later, if not at the next meeting, in an interim communication, so that you have an idea of what we're working with time-wise and what options might be available, if it's a summer thing or if it's a late fall thing or whenever that commences, knowing that summer may be a push, just given the permit pulling and the 6-month lag that Paul talked about. The other thing I'm wondering too, Director Southerton, if you would be willing to interject, because you and I had some recent conversation about what the project would entail in terms of dollar wise and, rough numbers on dollar, and then scope of the project, what we would be attempting to accomplish.
Certainly, Superintendent Owens, I'd be happy to speak about that. So in regards to the turf field, we have that. We've received estimates on that over the years, and their most recent estimate was probably about 6 months ago when our most recent AD arrived, and the estimate for just the turf field was around $1 million. On top of that, we would likely have to redo the track, as it would likely be impacted by construction. The track surrounds the football field, and it's due to be done again in a couple of years anyway. So it's not it's not something that we would be redoing off cycle per se. In addition to that, you have all the drainage considerations, and then last but not least, you have a stadium. We have a stadium that was built in 1960 and has not had any seismic improvements since then. So your overall, rough order of magnitude is what we describe it for construction. And it's a ROM, would be $2 to $2.5 million for the all-in cost for the project. And that would be, everything turnkey. So that'd be design, architecture, drainage, turf field, replacement or resurfacing of the track, and then seismic improvements. And I would probably estimate that it would be on the high side. I don't feel it would go over $2.5 million, but I think, you should kind of keep that in your mind as the number to have the whole complex kind of updated, if you will.
Awesome.
I believe, I'm sorry, Vice Chair.
Oh, sorry. No, you're fine. Continue.
I just want to add one thought for reference and comparison. I believe we've received a quote for reconditioning the existing grass field, removing the hundreds and hundreds, if not more, tons of dirt, and redoing the field and making sure that it's playable and level and sound, is upward in the neighborhoods of $500,000 to $600,000 comparatively. And again, that would be a somewhat temporary solution because, We know that these fields need additional maintenance, ongoing maintenance all the time. We also know that they're not usable for as much use because they get torn up and then they can't be used for games. So the benefit of a turf field being at Centennial, where we don't have an extra full-size football field, we have a soccer field that occasionally floods. Having a turf field allows us to, is in essence, leverage one field into three. So it can be a soccer field, it can be a football field, it can be a practice field, and it won't, it will hold up to that wear and tear.
Well, and it also becomes a classroom space for PE classes as well.
Thank you for the extra information. So I believe I was at, well, I'm confused. Okay, so I had Director Harden, did you go already?
We should move forward with repairing the field.
Okay.
And let's get some formal estimates. Let's figure out where the money's coming from and let's get a good timeline and let's make it happen. I've been on the board for 4+ years. I've been in the district 6+ years, and we've been talking about the whole time. So it'd be great to check this one off the list.
Director Andrews.
Sure, I have a couple of questions. I was under the impression that there was going to be some kind of cost sharing agreement with booster clubs or something like that. Is that still in the works?
I don't know if Principal Scott Aguirre can speak to that. I've heard a conversation of that previously, but I'm not sure if there's any active efforts. That is to say something, I'm understanding your question to say, if the board and the district put up $1 million, could we do a fundraising campaign to do $1 million match? Or could we find a sponsor or something like that, Nike or whomever, to help with the cost? Is that kind of the question you're asking, Director?
Yes.
The
Go ahead. Sorry.
Booster Club got started in about December 2019. We hadn't had a booster club for years, since before I came, and it got started up again in about December of 2019. So it's really only been in existence through the pandemic. So I don't know at this point if they would take that on with the limited amount of, right now, I'm not sure they have enough funds to run the concession stand. I mean, from how just barely started they are as a booster club.
So I think I'm hearing that we would need to plan on paying for the whole thing, but if we can get some contribution, that would be after we'd made the commitment on to move forward if we do that. I guess my second question is, I don't know enough about these kind of fields, but can you do field events from the track, like javelin and discus and stuff, or do we have to have completely different facilities for the field events for track season?
We throw javelin actually back behind the stadium on the soccer field. So you wouldn't throw javelin on the turf field. Discus, I'm trying to think of, that one we currently throw on the field, and I don't know. That's like if that has to be moved, someone will probably text me in a minute and tell me the specifics on that, but it's, I don't know if you can still do discus on the turf field, but javelin would be okay. You can do all rubber, you can do all field events. They use rubber stoppers rather than having the sharp point for the javelin.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Awesome. And then we have Director Salaska.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. I think that my question was also about track and field and just the impact there. And if we're talking about timeline and we're really prioritizing the football season, I just want to make sure that we're taking a step back and looking at how many students participate in football versus track and field and the displacement of their season as well, not just solely basing it on the football season.
That's an excellent point. I think part of considering this project would be very important to do outreach to the entire student body. We understand the strong connection that co-curricular activities have to keeping students engaged in their academic careers at school, and so, but also wanting to make sure that we're considerate of other groups that we're displacing. And currently we are impacting softball now because we have sports that practice on their field. So this would be a benefit to them as well. In regards to specifically in regards to track, we do run a pretty good track program at the middle school. I understand. I haven't seen it yet. This is the first year we'll have it while I'm here. And we did just resurface both the Oliver and the CMS track. So I think there's opportunity to utilize those facilities during the downtime, whereas we don't have another full-size football field in the district.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add on, though, I'm sorry to butt in. The Centennial Invitational is a huge, huge event.
Yep.
And so I don't think you could ever host that at one of the middle schools.
Okay, Director Lynn.
Oh, sure. I'll go down my list here. And first, just a quick question first. Do we have the finalization on the property sale on 172nd?
That's a great question. I believe you're referring to 174th.
I'm sorry.
Auxiliary bus lot. No, you're fine. Just wanted to make sure. We are under contract. It is scheduled to close late this week or early next. We are finalizing the use agreement, which is the last thing before we close. So that is, I can expand on that if you'd like a little more, Director Lynn.
No, you don't need to. That I'm very interested when it comes around. And that leads me into just like Director Andrews was speaking. I really hope that we can, I'm 100% behind us getting a new field for football. I was more of a grass man myself, but I want our families. We've been hearing that from families and stuff that they don't feel like we've been investing in our facilities, and I really want to invest in it to a point where they feel proud. Our athletes and our families feel proud when they come in and out of the stadium for football or track, which leads me into the second point. I really hope that I don't want to just do the football field. I do want to have that larger conversation. If there's any other sports where our investment can kick them over into a more professional level facilities, I want to make that investment if we have this chunk of money to make that investment at this time. Especially any kind of sports that have been neglected or anything like that. But then accompanying all of that, I think we also need to have a conversation where our schools are underfunded with nurses. I've heard that Oregon has a very low rate of nurses to student ratio. And if we have a big chunk of money where we're kind of throwing around, I want to fill in those kind of blanks. And then if we have things like janitors, where we have stories where teachers and principals and people we are paying for different jobs are filling in for janitors. I want to fill in those jobs. I want to make sure that those are 100% funded so that we make sure that people are working at the job that they're hired to do, that they're not filling in for other people in different classifications and stuff like that. So I want to have all that conversation, and I want to throw all this money at it. Because we have a big chunk of money. We need to invest in our community here. We don't just need to hold on to it. So, but I want to show the community that we're addressing all these issues at the same time.
Thank you, Director Lynn. Yes, Director Zlowski. Yes.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I really appreciate what Director Lynn said about the other sports as well. And just in conversations I've had with the baseball coach, I do know that at least this is what he presented to me at a certain point in time, is that they've had offers of people that are willing to help pay to put turf on the baseball field. But because of Title IX, we couldn't necessarily do the baseball field and not the softball field. And so if there is somebody that's willing to pay for turf for the baseball, and we can then pay for the softball and have both of them at turf fields, that would be awesome as well.
That's an excellent comment. Thank you for surfacing that. I do want, this is a great opportunity perhaps to just kind of recap what we're doing with the bond in our athletic facilities. So you'll recall that we're spending approximately $16 million to build 4 new gymnasiums, which will help with physical education and activities on the elementary level. We did resurface and rebuild 2 tracks at the middle school, or soon to be middle school, Oliver, and at CMS. We've got another project that's out for bid currently with the swimming pool, which will be about $1.2 million. And then we've upgraded our tennis facilities. They still need to be covered, and they have that final rubber surface applied as soon as the Oregon rain and weather cooperates. But that was almost another $1 million as well. So all told, I mean, we've through this bond, we've invested greatly in our athletic facilities, as well as our classrooms and as well as our core systems. So, you know, I can't mention a bond project without just thanking the community for their support. And we've done, you know, I think we've looked at the whole experience for the student, whether it's co-curricular or it's classroom or it's elementary or it's middle school. You know, middle school renovations are pretty extensive going on at CMS, and then converting Oliver to a middle school. Those students are going to have a great experience as well. So I can't think of any facilities that will need to be upgraded after the stadium in the football fields, but I think there's always opportunities to look to further the, you know, student experience. And we would certainly work with Principal Scott Aguirre and Principal Castillo and Principal Hubbs at the middle school level, as well as we have funding.
I believe Director Shield was first, and then Director Andrews.
One of the things that I'm hearing, and I want clarification on, is that's balancing between what's happening, you know, with different sports, right? Displacement. So I'm just making sure that that would be part of the discussion when you're presenting it back to us about the planning phases of that. But I'm going to say that, but I'm also going to say, if I could pass this, make a motion and pass a motion to, you know, get the artificial turf installed this summer, I want to do it. But you have to help us with that, and we have to educate ourselves to the impact of that. But I truly am sooner rather than later for that space. So just don't take a whole lot of time planning this, dudes. Let's get this thing off and running, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Sorry.
Thank you, Director Shields. The first step would be for me to bring forward a resolution just asking for funding to investigate the project, plan the project, do the budget, do the calendar, you know, hire the consultants, and then, you know, that would be just the dollars to get you an exact estimate and a timeline that would work with everybody. That would be probably my first course of action, and I can bring that to a future board meeting if that's the will of everybody. Okay.
Director Andrews.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. Director Lynn, I kind of had a question. It seems like you want to have a broader conversation about other potential investments, or I'm not sure. It seems to me like the things you're bringing up are operating costs, not capital investments, and I'm not sure that's kind of the right. Help me understand that there a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. And like Director Shields was saying, I want to get on this as quickly as possible to make the right schedule to deliver for our community as quickly as possible. But I just don't want it to be a limited conversation about just investing in football. I don't want I don't want our community to hear any, see any like news articles about principals doing janitorial work or their kids not having nursing and like vital services and stuff like that. So I just want to include that in this conversation about allocating money. But I have no problem with us moving forward with the football field as soon as possible.
But when you're talking about ongoing costs or operating expenses, I don't know that we ever had considered using these sale proceeds for operating costs. But anyway, okay.
I think I understand your question. I think maybe that's a budget committee question about why have in the past we have not invested in these things to the level that maybe people might want them. But yeah, I am totally on boards with a conversation about ever throwing extra money on it because of COVID, because of what's gone on in the last 2 years, or whether it just needs to be a regular budget committee issue.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Do we have any other folks that would like to comment on this subject? Awesome. And then, oh yes, Director Shields.
Only in the sense of, if we're hearing it correctly, that there's consensus to move forward as quickly as possible, and maybe we could take the temperature of the board members, that Director Southerton says he would need a resolution to expend funds for. You have to expend the money to find out how much money you're going to spend, right?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing? So could we do the resolution tonight to authorize the funding the plan, to figure out the plan? I just,
I'm sorry.
this is new, right? But in the spirit of sooner rather than later,
yeah.
What does Director Southerton do, or Superintendent Owen have to tell us about this? Because I'm hearing consensus, move, right? Move on this turf.
So I do say that I'm hearing consensus as well too, but we do not have every one member of our board either.
It doesn't make, I'm sorry, but just because we have one member not here doesn't hold up the decision to move forward.
No, we can always, and that's the next question out that we can also go in to ask Director Sutherland actually is, at least from what I'm hearing, is that what you need is you would like to draft up the resolution, correct?
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. You are correct. At this point in time, I have your direction to pursue getting a budget estimate, a design fee quote. Our partners would, what it would cost to have them design this project, right? They estimate the cost of design, and that would include a cost estimate for construction, permit expedition, all the different fees and associated, just like any of the bond projects. Before we start any of the bond projects, we've got a rough number, and then hire the architects and the designers and the city planner consultants and whatnot to give us a firm number that we then put it out to the street for bid, and we see what comes back, right?
Yes.
So to move forward with getting that design estimate, I just need what you've provided already, which is that direction to, hey, go talk to RNC management and get us a service fee quote on designing field improvements and or stadium improvements. And then when they provide that quote, I will come back at the next meeting or the one after and say, we've been quoted. We went out to 3 different groups and we received a quote for $150,000 to design our turf field improvements. I would the authorization to proceed with that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I totally thought that was what that was for. Yes, Director Harden.
So we're not pigeonholing, saying it's for one sport. Can we address it as outdoor high school athletic facilities?
Yeah.
And, you know, because it really is kind of, let's see what we can do with the whole area and how much it would cost. And then once we figure out how much the whole thing would cost, maybe we find out how much money we actually can afford to spend and start parceling it and seeing the best, most effective use of our funds.
Yes, sounds good. Yeah, I have no problem using that as outdoor facilities. I like that as well too. Does anybody have anything else to contribute to this conversation? Director Andrews.
Sorry, it seems like we should, based on what Director Harden just said, look at what was on the capital list that was below the line, just as Director Shields had said at the introduction. This outdoor facility was below the line, but what is this? What was originally scoped? And it probably is that broader facility and not just replacing the field. I'm not sure, but it would be good to know what that description was of that item on the capital, on the bond, on the list of stuff for bond, that this was below the line. Sorry for the additional piece.
Awesome. Okay. Let's
Can
see.
address that.
Yes.
Director Southerton and I were just looking at that this week, and I have a document that I can share with you whenever you'd like it. I can send it in a Friday update.
That would be wonderful.
Yep.
Okay, so with that being said, we are done with 7.2.4, but we're going to go back up to 6.6.2 to discuss elementary classroom projector replacements. And I believe that Director Andrews wanted to bring something to us. So I wanted
Yeah.
to make,
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yep, just go ahead.
Okay, so Director Southerton, you know, I had some questions about this. One was how many projectors we were purchasing, and the other was what's the embedded interest rate in this? And I guess I just wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about paying for this in cash or paying for it out of that reserve fund, rather than incurring the $40,000 worth of interest that was going to accrue over or need to be paid over these 5 years. So that's that. You can buy a lot of equipment with $40,000 and not just pay interest.
You can, and if that's the direction of the board, that certainly is an option for us. We can certainly buy these outright. Again, I'd come back to the board with a new resolution authorizing utilization of those funds, unless we want to modify the current resolution approving the purchase and taking out the financing part. I believe you have a board note that includes the financing aspect. So if we want to change that sentence to say, utilizing board reserve funds, we can make a modification to that if the board would like.
Okay, I would like to open this up for discussion. I have Director Shields.
It's funny because I guess I wrote to Director Southerton about the same kind of an issue when I saw the $40,000 interest rate. And thank you, Director Andrews, for bringing it up. The board reserve fund is a one-time money only. When it's spent, it's gone, period, end of quote. That's why we won't be using it for operational issues. But if we already planned on paying paying in payments, I would be interested. First of all, I would support us paying cash for it. I would support it being used out of the board reserve fund to save us $40,000 over the 5-year period of time, so that could be utilized for, other types of things, right? And in doing so, though, that we would be paying back ourselves. I've taken a loan or two in my personal life and from, against something and paid myself back over time. But I don't know what the rules are. That's where we would really have to rely upon your expertise to help us know what the rules would be. You know, I know there's a timely piece to this. Things have to get ordered or they don't get here in time to get installed. But I would like to have yes, support board reserve funds, pay cash, and then set up a mechanism to pay ourselves back that amount, if that's possible.
And I'm happy to answer the question or how I would see the mechanics of that working under Oregon budget law. So the board would approve the purchase of the projectors. And then the board would approve in subsequent budgets the transfer of $79,000 or what would have been the payment from the general fund into the board reserve account. The general fund would have been making the payments on this lease. So it's just mechanics of how we would transfer it, and that would have to be approved by the budget committee and adopted by the board as all budget expenses are. But we do transfer money from the general fund into other funds as needed. So early retirement did so this past year, I believe. The risk management fund did so in previous years. So it's certainly allowable as long as it's approved by the governing bodies of the budget committee and the board.
Do we have any other folks that would like to weigh in on this discussion?
Question, are there any drawbacks to this? Or are there any things that could be problematic about this? It doesn't seem like it, but I don't know if there's something I'm missing.
In my calculation, the drawback is we can't spend $1 twice, right? So if we divert, and that's a poor choice of words, I'm sorry, if we utilize these funds, if we utilize board reserve funds for the projectors, that means we can't utilize them for something else. Now to speak to Director Lynn's and other board members' concerns, we have invested CARES Act recovery funds, relief funds in additional janitorial custodial positions and in other positions, nursing positions and SHAWs, school health assistants through the ESD. Unfortunately, while we've allocated the funding, it's difficult to find staff. It's the same reason we started this meeting today talking about the curtailment of bus drivers. It is just a very, very difficult environment to find staff. And so that's where we're running into challenges. And then we had the spike in COVID cases. So then that just, unfortunately expanded the impact. So that is to say that if the board wanted to utilize these funds to purchase the projectors and then repay the money or do a transfer back to the board reserve account over the next 5 years, there would be little to no impact on the board reserve account. You'd lose a little purchasing power over the next 5 years because the time value of money, $1 is worth more today than it will be 5 years from now. But I think that trade-off, saving the district $40,000 in interest, that certainly we have plenty of need and not enough funds, and we can certainly find other things to spend that $40,000 on that serves our students. So that makes sense to me.
I think you make up the time value money. It depends on how far inflation rises, but you make up the time value for money by saving the 40,000. But also, Director Slawski, the risk is that every year the budget committee has to agree to move the 80,000 or 79,000 or whatever that amount is back into the reserve fund. And so we can't commit, this board can't commit that that'll happen for the next 5 years. We just have to rely on future boards to follow through with our expectations, right?
Thank you, Director Andrews. That's helpful.
Awesome. Do we have anyone else to participate in this? Director Lynn, did you have anything?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate everybody's comments.
Yes, and I appreciate everyone's comments as well too. This does seem, and this is just to me and what's been brought to me as well too, this does seem like it might it'll do better, not might, but it will help us invest in more projects that actually is going to be effective towards students instead of just the just sitting there in interest. So I am for that as well too, which is fine. So I think that is a consensus for everyone. So Director Southerton, if you want to create that resolution and bring it to the board next time at our next meeting, that would be great.
Can we just do that through a simple motion this evening?
I'm not sure. Is that?
I mean, I don't know that a resolution has a different set, has a different threshold. Has in the past had a different threshold of need, where a motion is, at the direction of the board, based on the current discussion, do this. What I understand Director Southerton to say is that we at least at the minimum have to approve that first paragraph. We just purchase those things so we can get it into the supply line so we can get them here this summer. Yeah. So is that correct, Director Southerton? We should act at least on part of it tonight, or?
I hesitate to instill a sense of urgency because that gets, I'm sure you get fatigue after that. But our projects or the vendor who we're purchasing this from has committed to have these to us by January 1st if we get the order into them in the next week or two, which would provide the summer for installation. We're physically removing 175 projectors from elementary schools and physically installing 175 new ones on top of anything else that we may be doing, like refurbishing Chromebooks. Should we have to issue those district-wide, or should we have other things? So if a voice vote has, or a confirmation item has typically been sufficient and just recorded by the board secretary. The board approved the motion to purchase projectors utilizing board reserve funds. And I can display the language if that's helpful, so everybody can clearly have it and understand what you would be voting on.
Do we have any questions about this potential motion? All right. So do I have a motion to pass this confirmation item?
I move that we use board reserve funds to purchase the $358,400 worth of projectors and other equipment in lieu of lease financing.
And I second that.
Awesome. So we have a motion by Director Andrews to approve projector purchasing and financing in lieu of, sorry, say that one more time, in lieu of.
Using reserve funds in lieu of lease financing.
Using reserve funds in lieu of lease financing. You can obviously tell it's been a long night, so I apologize. So one more time.
We're going to use reserve funds in lieu of lease financing to purchase the projectors.
Reserve funds in lieu of lease financing to buy projectors.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So seconded by Director Shields. All in favor, say aye.
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 That is a unanimous motion.
Great catch, Director Andrews.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director Andrews. All right, with that being said, do we have any future agenda items or for the good of the order? Not seeing any. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh yes, sorry, Director Shields.
Just that we'll just roll over, right? We're just going to roll forward the things that we were missing.
Yep, we're rolling forward, return to in-person board meetings and the board email discussion to the next meeting agenda. And then the next meeting is not the next board meeting because the next meeting is on February 2nd, Wednesday from 6 to 8, our board training with Vince.
Awesome. All right. Do we have a motion for an adjournment?
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
Awesome. So we have motion for adjournment by Director Shields, seconded by Director Harden. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.